What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and welcome back to Poker Hands. Today we're going to be taking a look at a hand from Poker After Dark between Phil Ivey and David Peat.
2,500.
Ivey looking to get involved with Queen 7 off, and Pete picks up kings on the button. He'll smooth call. Oppenheim makes 3 players.
Our hand begins with a pretty WTF open at the hijack by Phil Ivey with Queen 7 off. I know some players like to believe that you have to raise it up with everything sometimes. Not the case. Fold your Queen 7 off here in the hijack. The cutoff folds, and now it's to David Peat on the button with kings waking up huge here against Phil Ivey. Not only is it good to have kings, and it's good to be in position, when you 3-bet on the button, it generally looks a lot weaker because you're going to be more aggressive in this position because you get to go last. So you want to make sure on the button, more than any other position, debatably other than the small blind, that you're aggressively 3-betting to try and take control of the hand. By mixing in some suited hands here like 6-5 suited, 10-9 suited, some suited aces, those types of holdings, you can make your opponent want to pay you off with your good hands and put a lot of pressure on them. So here we have a very clear 3-bet. If you want to mix in the trap, you should probably look to do it with aces, and maybe he's a little worried about the players behind. That said, Oppenheim in the big blind, not exactly a squeezy player, so I don't really like this decision to call. Maybe if you had Dwan in the blinds, it could be a little more reasonable to set the trap and look to come in for the back raise once he 3-bets. But as played, you got to 3-bet the button, take control of the hand, knock the blinds out, and also, by the way, there are bad flops for kings, flops that have an ace. Once the action then folds to Oppenheim in the big blind, I like his decision to call with 7-5 off and take a flop. So let's take this flop 3 ways.
Jack high flop.
$5,500.
Betting a call of 5,500 in front of Oppenheim, who lays down.
The flop comes Jack 9-4 with 2 hearts, and no one really connects. Oppenheim checks in the big blind with a 7-5, and now it's over to Ivey with Queen 7. Now, yes, Ivey has 2 decisions here. He can check or he can bet, but I'm really not a very big fan of bet. He has plenty of other draws he might want to bet with. What if he has a hand like Queen 10? What if he has a hand like Queen 8? What if he has a hand like 10-8 suited? What if he has hearts? What if he has diamonds? What if he has King Queen? What if he has 8-7 suited? There are so many other hands that he might want to choose to bluff here that he doesn't have to use a hand this bad. I know it's tempting to bet to try and take the pot down, and maybe if he was just up against the big blind, I'd like this play a bit better, but there are 2 people still in this pot. Pete can easily have a hand with a jack or a 9 in it, and he's actually got way stronger than that, and the big blind's also going to connect with his flop sometimes. So when he bets 5,500 here to try and just take the pot down, I don't think this bet's going to get through enough. And if you get calls, what are you really rooting for? I mean, even a turn queen isn't exactly the greatest. You now have to tread lightly as you lose to hands like King 10, 10-8, Queen Jack, etc. So I'm not a fan of this bet, and now it's over to David Peat. With kings here on the flop, he really can go either way, either calling or raising. I generally lean a little bit more towards calling because he still does lose to aces as well as now flop sets and Jack 9. If he decided to trap aces pre-flop, I would definitely like to see a raise here on the flop because you're so far ahead of all of the value range and you're going to be pretty protected because you can have hands like a set of 4s, set of 9s, Jack 9 suited, maybe Jack 9 off. So you can have plenty of good hands here, and aces mixes in nicely there. You can oftentimes win a big pot off kings or queens if you did trap pre-flop by raising and looking to barrel. Now, he does decide to call, which I think is fine. I think both plays are fine. I maybe lean a little bit more towards call. And it's now on Oppenheim in the big line with 7-5 and a very clear fold. So we're now heads up going into the turn, and Ivey's situation is looking pretty dire.
Ace on the turn. Can't be Pete's favorite card. No second barrel from Ivey. Viffer checks behind him.
The turn comes another ace, which is an interesting card. In fact, generally speaking, when the pre-flop raise or continuation bets and the turn comes an ace, it's almost always an interesting spot. Because the thing is, if the person that opened bets all their ace highs on the flop to begin with, they can definitely have top pair a lot. But if they're always betting their ace highs on the flop, they're going to have a tough time if they get raised. Imagine if you had ace queen, you bet the flop and you get raised. What do? So you have to kind of play a balancing game with those hands on the flop and do a little bit of both actions. Now this does mean that this card can hit Ivey, and so it's a fairly good card to continue bluffing. However, he has a lot of better bluffs. He could bluff with some straight draws, some flush draws, some hands that can actually get there. So finally, Ivey decides to slow it down and check it over to David Peat. Now Peat has an interesting decision with kings. It's fairly unlikely Ivey does have an ace. He's not likely to bet the flop and then check the turn. He's probably going to go for some value. So I'd probably like to see David bet here and like to get called by queens, a jack, maybe some king, queen, or flush draw type hands that didn't bet the turn. But he actually decided to take the conservative road, as he has for most of this hand, and check it back on the turn. At some point with your strong hands, you need to build the pot. And I know that an ace on the turn isn't exactly the ideal situation, but you can't help but feel like should Peat have raised in some positions, he might not have won much money against Queen 7, but he definitely could have put himself in a better situation to win more money. Anyway, check on the turn. Let's play the river.
5 on the end.
10,000.
The river comes the 5 of diamonds, and now Ivey has a pretty reasonable spot to take a stab. He has a diamond in his hand, so his opponent's a bit less likely to have a flush, and he could certainly have had a few hands that bet the flop for value, had to check the turn on the ace, and can now bet in the river for value, like maybe a hand like kings or queens, maybe a hand like king jack, possibly a hand like a weak ace. So he can absolutely bet here and try and represent some value bets, and it's kind of hard for him to have worse than Queen 7. I would really like to see Ivey take a stab. However, he doesn't. He decides to check it over to David Peat, who now has a clear as day value bet. He's got kings. It's become painfully clear his opponent doesn't have that beat because of the turn check and the river check, and it's time to go for a little bit of value. He bets 10,000, which I don't mind. It's about half pot. You could maybe argue to go a little bit bigger, and now the action's back over on Ivey. Now, at this point, I'm starting to get a little bit confused because Ivey can't even beat some of the hands David Peat is bluffing with, which means maybe, just maybe, Ivey's getting ready to pull the trigger and make a huge move.
Peat immediately fires 10,000 on the river for value, and Ivey's going to pay him off with queen high. Uncharacteristic play by Phil, who clearly thought Viffer was on a bluff.
So dangerous. Limp with king, just call with kings. Wow.
He beats 10-8, 10-7. Not queen 8, not queen 10. He beats like 2 hands, maybe 8-7. I don't get it. Thank you for joining me here today for Poker Hands. And I want to say really quick, I know we have a lot of new people that haven't been on YouTube before that are watching these videos. And I just want to say that subscribing to the channel both helps me and you. It helps me grow my channel, and it helps you get the videos much quicker so you don't have to look around for them. So help me out, help yourself out, and subscribe to the channel.